Thank you. Could I ask those members who are leaving the chamber to please do so now quickly and quietly, as we're moving on to the final item of business, which is the members' business debate on motion 15654 in the name of Kenneth Gibson on opposition to the Post Office closure plan. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put. I would invite those members who would wish to speak in the debate to please press the request to speak button, and I call on Kenneth Gibson to open the debate. Up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and also thank all members who signed my motion, in particular Tim Eagle, Ross Greer and Liam MacArthur, with post offices threatened in the regions and constituency, who signed the motion in order that it could be debated today. Unfortunately, my colleague Christine Graham, who hoped to speak, has been called away suddenly through illness, and I hope she makes a swift recovery. I'm also grateful to Adam Sakura at Age Scotland for the briefing on the importance of post offices to older people. This issue affects all parts of the country, and our support for our local post offices should transcend party lines. As this year's UK Labour manifesto said, the post office is an essential service in communities across the country. Labour will look for ways to strengthen the post office in consultation with sub-postmasters, trade unions and customers, and support the development of new products, services and business models. I couldn't agree more. It's therefore disappointing that within a few short months of gaining office, they reneged on this commitment. For our communities, rural or urban, post offices are a focal point. According to 2022 research by Citizen Advice, 18% of people visit a post office every week, while 45% do so at least once a month. In rural areas, these figures are even higher. In addition to providing essential services, post offices help to address financial and social exclusion. For older and disabled people, carers and those without the internet, they are an essential face-to-face service without parallel. The benefits, not just economic but social, that the post office network provides are immeasurable. The human and financial costs of a community losing its post office will surely be more than whenever subsidy was on offer. Between 1999 and 2015, over 900 postmasters were falsely accused of theft and fraud due to errors in the Horizon IT system supplied by Fujitsu. After all the ruined careers, financial devastation and even wrongful imprisonment, we now see it clearly as one of the gravest miscarriages of justice in modern British history. On 13 November 2024, Post Office Chair Nigel Railton set out their transformation plan in the wake of the Horizon scandal. In an effort to rebuild trust and financial stability, the plan sets out goals to increase postmaster remuneration, boost their share of revenues and enhance the role of postmasters in decision-making. This would be uncontroversial were it not for the fact that proposals require the closure of all remaining Crown offices to balance the books. 115 post office branches, 10 in Scotland and 1,000 post office employees are now under threat. Of course, closure proposals cannot be viewed in isolation. The number of Crown branches has steadily declined since the 1980s as the post office shifted towards franchised and agency-managed branches as a way of reducing costs. This has accelerated in recent years, and between 2013 and 2023, the number of Crown branches fell by 69%. This matters because Crown branches offer a far more extensive range of services like DVLA photocard renewal, foreign currency, travel insurance, identity services and passport applications, to name but a few, than sub-post offices. Saltcoats Post Office in my constituency has been at its location in Chapel Wells Street since 1971. The previous post office building was further up the same street and opened in 1909. It was later taken over by the Royal Bank of Scotland until that branch closed in 2018. The potential closure of the post office has sparked widespread alarm among Saltcoats residents and business owners alike. For 11.5 decades, Chapel Wells Street Post Office has provided essential services that underpin both daily life and the local economy. Its loss would not only sever a vital link to banking and postal facilities, but also deepen the challenges already faced by the town. Stephen McAllister, owner of the award-winning Candy Bar Bakery, described it as the lifeblood of the area, adding that without it many local businesses would struggle to survive. He highlighted that with banks and building societies closing in town centres, the post office in Saltcoats has become a vital resource. Banking for the Candy Bar in Kilwinning and West Kilbride is undertaken in Saltcoats. Mr McAllister warned if the post office would close, it would be a devastating blow to the local community and a tragedy for the area. As it's at Chapel Well, he undertakes that work. You carry on. Sorry, yes.
Ferguson.
Many thanks for giving way. Is he aware that one of the post offices under threat, his future is under question now, is Queensgate in the centre of Inverness, which forms part of the heart of Inverness and is essential for many senior citizens. It brings them into the town and life into the town. And does he think that the post office might be better to address the salaries that they pay themselves The Chief Executive got £816,000 in 21-22, down to a paltry £573,000 in 22-23. Shouldn't they start at the top if they want to save money?
Kenneth
Member
Gibson.
makes an excellent point. The team behind the Metro nightclub in Saltcoats also expressed concern about the potential closure of the town's post office, describing it as a massive loss to the community. They highlighted the challenges businesses already face due to the departure of banks from the town, noting that the post office is crucial for tasks such as depositing money and obtaining change. The closure, they warned, would make it significantly harder for businesses to operate efficiently locally, calling it a fundamental part of the community that must be preserved. The team also pointed to the important role that the post office plays for older residents, as Fergus Ewing just remarked, many of whom use it to pay bills, withdraw cash and save money for family occasions. For some, they noted, it's more than just a post office, and visiting is a vital part of their routine. Nationally, the reaction from the Communication Workers Union representing post office staff has been scathing, describing the closure plan and the threat to 1,000 jobs as being tone-deaf as it is immoral. The CWU called on the UK Government to intervene, saying, Labour has to ensure it does not become the government that targeted elderly people with the removal of the winter fuel allowance and then saw crucial services they rely on removed. I fear they will be disappointed. Despite donations to the Labour Party and Labour MPs worth more than £500,000 this year, barely a whimper has come from Labour. Indeed, the CWU donated £6,000 to Labour's recent Westminster campaign in North Ayrshire and constituency. So far, it seems they have had little or no return. Disappointingly, not a single Labour MSP signed today's motion, and only one is present in the chamber. MSPs Bibby, Clark, Morgan, Rowley, Smith, Sweeney and Villa Alba, along with current Secretary of State Ian Murray MP, all denounced the closure of local post offices during the era of the wicked Tory government, but seem a little more coy now. I'm tempted to quote them, but we'll save their blushes and move on. The Labour UK Government Minister responsible for post offices, Gareth Thomas MP, has refused to give any assurances about the future of Crown branches. I'll leave it to CWU members to look at this tepid response and decide whether their weekly political levy is currently money well spent. Presiding Officer, the closure of the last 115 Crown post offices doesn't just represent a loss of essential services, it would symbolise the neglect of our town centres. At a time when towns are crying out for regeneration, Crown branches should be serving as vital components, drawing both people and businesses back to our high streets. We should be talking about their extension, not their abolition. Our communities deserve far better than the proposed managed decline of a valuable public asset. Ultimately, the UK Labour Government is required to sign off on these proposals. I've certainly written to them, and I trust the Scottish Government is lobbying them hard to think again. They must now listen to the voice of communities, business owners and workers and lift the threat of closure from Saltcoats and other affected towns. Our communities and our post offices deserve much better than to be the last victims of the Horizon scandal. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Gibson. I now call Bob Doris to be followed by Craig Coy. Mr Doris.
My apologies, Presiding Officer. I am working off my iPad, which is unlike me, so let's see how we get on. Presiding Officer, I commend Kenny Gibson securing this debate on the leaked plans to review and reduce Crown Post Offices in Scotland and across the UK. That gives me the opportunity to highlight that the Crown Post Office within Springburn Shopping Centre in my constituency is one of the branches that could be facing the axe. That is something that I find deeply worrying for several reasons. Most fundamentally, my constituency of Marehill Springburn now has no high street bank. It hasn't had for some time. Each time a bank closed, including 3 in Springburn in recent years, the banks indicate they will work hard to innovate and provide alternative banking opportunities for those who are most vulnerable or who may be at risk of financial exclusion. Each time the banks pack up and head out of town and the promises melt away incredibly quickly. It is in that context that I know that the prospect of the Crown Post Office in Springburn closing fills many of my constituents with great dread, concern and alarm. The people of Springburn do not expect the UK Government's Post Office to treat the people of Springburn as shoddily as the UK banks have done. That Post Office is one of the very few vital anchor services that brings local residents into the town centre to access core financial services and a wider range of other services. Indeed, it also brings them to the town centre to spend their often under strain disposable incomes within the area. The possible closure of the Crown Post Office would not only lead to be a major blow for those who rely on their services, but also a body blow to the town centre itself and the shopping centre that sits within it. a body blow to the local economy, local businesses, many of our elderly and are vulnerable. As the local MSP, but also as a trustee of the local charity Spirit of Springburn, I want the services and amenities to be enhanced in Springburn, not further diminished. Having looked at the criteria under which potential decisions on Crown Post offices may be made, I can see absolutely nothing which suggests a vital role that Post Office plays within the town centre for its office, a precarious town centre environment and the local economy. It's completely silent in relation to that matter. The criteria does not take it into account at all. I have written and met with the Post Office and I thank them for their engagement. It is clear that the current plans are a direct consequence of the 5-year strategy the Post Office has set out. A strategy process commenced under the last Conservative government, but actually signed off in action and approved under the current UK Labour government. I understand that the cost savings to be delivered by potentially closing post offices is in part to help source funds to better reward postmasters. Now, I appreciate there may very well be a need to do so, but that should not be done on the backs of the communities and towns who rely on their Crown Post offices to access core financial and other services, not off the backs of the vulnerable in my constituency, Presiding Officer. Communities less likely to have a bank account in the first place, let alone online banking, or to apply online for a variety of services only available otherwise at a Crown Post Office. Now, Mr Gibson has written to Gareth Thomas MP, the UK Government Parliamentary Under Secretary of State for this matter. I intend doing so also. I hope we can do it on a cross-party basis, including Labour MSPs, I hope, in that call as well, to halt this process and to think again. I asked the Post Office about the amount of customers using Springburn, the amount of transactions and the kind of services being used. The Post Office genuinely tried to be as helpful as possible to me, but they were unable to give me official data for public consumption. They were unable to do so due to the commercial confidentiality. But I need that data, and my constituents need that data to plan a way ahead to retain that Post Office. We know the Post Office is very busy. I suspect many hundreds of customers every single week and many more vital transactions. The banks closed in Springburn. The banks closed right across Maryhill and Springburn. The UK Government can do something this time to stop core financial services in my constituency being terminated and being dragged out of Springburn. They must act, and they must act now, and I commend Kenny Gibson for bringing this debate to Parliament this evening.
Thank you, Mr Doris. I call Craig Hoy to be followed by Liam MacArthur. Mr Hoy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I start by thanking Kenny Gibson for bringing forward this important debate? Post Office employees are right to be concerned and very worried about the forthcoming consultation. And it is right that they are fully consulted on the next move. And as Kenny Gibson and others have said, we would not know about these potential closures had it not been for the fact that this information was leaked. It was not the Labour Government nor the Post Office that brought these potential closures to the public's attention. And we also must remember that a key part of any consultation are the customers who rely on the Post Office network throughout Scotland, and particularly in the South of Scotland region, which I represent. And following the announcement, I was contacted by several residents in Haddington, including the Haddington Central Tenants and Residents Association, who expressed their alarm that a very popular and well-used local post office, which, as Kenny Gibson said, is much more than simply a post office, was a threat. It is a vital resource for the community, who rely on it not just for postal services, but for banking, and also as a community hub. And I think it is vitally important that we also remember that in areas such as East Lothian, many banks have closed in recent years, and there is now an increased emphasis on the Post Office being a source of cash and also as a source of banking services. And that's particularly the case in areas with an older demographic, such as Haddington and East Lothian. I will take an intervention on that point.
Rachel Hamilton.
Sorry, I haven't gone through the right process, Presiding Officer. On Friday, I visited the new banking hub at Jedburgh, which is operated by a Post Office Master, but it's Cash Access UK. They offer withdrawal service and paying bills, etc., but they don't offer a specific post office service. And I think it would be a great idea, I don't know if the member agrees with me, that we should be campaigning to make sure we have proper banking hubs with combined post office services.
Craig Coy.
I think Rachel Hamilton is absolutely correct, and where post offices and banks are at risk, it would surely be logical that you would bring the postal services and the banking service under one roof. And Age Scotland sent me a very informative briefing ahead of this debate, looking at how people aged over 50 view services within their local communities. And within 20 minutes of their home, those facilities that are viewed as essential, they're a bank at 32%, a post office at 23%, and community spaces also at 23%. And the post office in Harington forms all of those functions in relation to, yes, being a post office, yes, for some customers being a bank, but also being a source of community engagement for many, many customers. And as banks continue to retreat, it is going to be increasingly important that post offices take up the slack. I think it's also important that you remember that these Crown post offices provide additional services to banking hubs or those provided by sub-postmasters. So therefore we must do everything we can to try and defend them, because otherwise we're looking at people going online or engaging in longer journeys. And that obviously counts both against the climate change targets that we're setting, but also is simply impossible for some older people or those in rural areas who still lack access to high-speed broadband. Now, when I spoke to the Post Office about the closure of the branch in Harington, they said this was being done in order to make savings, in order to be able to look at how they fund sub-postmasters in future. But it would be an absolute tragedy, because of the mistakes that the Post Office have made in the past, that customers are impacted into the future. In relation to the Post Office in Harington, I was informed that there could be 3 potential outcomes. One would be outright closure, 2 would be to find somebody to take over the franchise of that post office, or 3 potentially to move it to another location. I would be totally opposed to the closure, and I would also question whether moving or closing such a popular and well-used facility would be in the interests of the town. It's quite clear that those services are vitally important for everyone in our communities, but particularly those who are elderly, disabled, and those who live in rural and deprived areas. So I say this to the residents of Harington and the neighbouring villages. I will continue to work with the Post Office and with stakeholders and with the community to ensure that you continue to have access to local postal and banking services. They are vital now, and they will be vital into the future. And I look forward to working with the community to make sure that the Post Office does not close this important local resource.
Thank you, Mr Hoy. I now call Liam MacArthur to be followed by Carol Mockin. Mr MacArthur.
Thank you. Can I start by wishing Christine Graham well? Despite her attempt to try and mow me down as she came out of the canteen earlier on, I do wish her a speedy recovery. Can I also congratulate Kenny Gibson on securing this evening's debate and for his kind comments earlier on. I'm not sure whether I'd maybe go as far as to suggest that what we need is more Crown post offices, but at the very least retaining what we have would seem to be highly desirable. The Kirkwall Crown Post Office in my own Orkney constituency is under threat, and it is absolutely integral to the local community for many of the reasons that Kenneth Gibson set out in his opening remarks, and I'll maybe come on to that later. But I think Bob Doris made, I think, a very valid point, not just about the process, but the way in which information about this leaked out. That has not helped a difficult situation. Indeed, it's made it, I think, considerably worse. We had the announcement, then quickly thereafter we had the clarification, and I think all that has done is sow the seeds of confusion. It's certainly created uncertainty for staff, uncertainty for customers, and uncertainty within the wider community in the Crown offices served that have appeared on this list. It's certainly, I think, also resulted perhaps in a loss of faith. Whatever consultation now takes place, I think there will be an understandable sense that the consultation itself, or the results of that, have been prejudged, and that is, I think, a reflection or a result of the way in which the Post Office has managed the the information flow on this issue. Alistair Carmichael and myself met very recently with the Post Office on the back of that announcement. We were given many of the assurances I suspect other colleagues have received either directly or in correspondence. I think another point that Bob Doris fairly made was in relation to the lack of detailed data about how each of the Crown Post Offices are performing. Certainly from my perspective, the Crown Post Office in Kirkwall has always appeared very busy, particularly at this time of year, but certainly not exclusively at this time of year. Therefore, it's difficult to understand for me, and I think for many of my constituents, why this post office has found itself on a post office hit list. The consultation itself, again, we were provided assurances that this would be meaningful. It certainly hasn't been early, but I think the Post Office has got its work cut out to try and make up for lost ground. As I say, the Post Office itself is enormously busy. It is, I think, as Kenneth Gibson referred to, the lifeblood of the community. But it's important not just for Kirkwall, it is important for the wider Orkney community, being the last remaining Crown Post Office in Orkney. It's crucial to local businesses. On the back of the news emerging, I've been contacted by very many constituents, including many business owners. I had one in touch with me the other week to say, the company I manage has mountains of regulatory posts that is sent to clients from our local office each day. And the prospect of that service not being available in the same way or to the same extent as is available now, I think has implications in the wider business community in Orkney. It's crucial also for personal customers. The services they provide through passports, driving licence, etc., again, has been a concern raised by many. Yes, the service is increasingly available online, but as Age Scotland's pointed out, and as many constituents have pointed out, that is not without its challenges in many instances. And the other service that is provided by the Crown Post Office in Kirkwall almost uniquely is the foreign currency exchange. And for an economy that is so reliant on tourism, particularly on liners, the availability of that service is absolutely fundamental. And I think there's a real concern about the potential loss of spending within the Kirkwall and the wider Orkney community. As it happens, the Crown Post Office is positioned almost directly opposite the Tourist Information Centre that has been earmarked for closure as well. And altogether, that's creating a degree of uncertainty within a community that relies so heavily on it. So, Post Office needs to heed the voices of customers, their staff and the wider community. There needs to be a meaningful consultation and I would hope a rethink of this position so that the services, the vital services the Crown Post Office in Kirkwall provides can continue to be provided long into the future. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Ms MacArthur. I now call Carol Mochan, who's joining us remotely, to be followed by Audrey Nicholl. Ms Mochan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And thank you to Kenny Gibson for raising this issue in the Parliament. Can I start by applauding the fine work of the Communication Workers Union, the CWU, on this matter as they continue to boldly stand up for their members against the decisions of the Post Office that are causing, as we've heard in the Chamber tonight, serious stress and concern for many families just before Christmas, whilst they're working so hard to keep the postal service moving. And I would also add on to Liam MacArthur that is throughout the year. The proposal to close 115 remaining Crown branches across the UK was taken, as we've heard, without prior consultation with trade unions, and the CWU inform us that they have not even been given sight of the strategic review document which led to this decision. That is simply unacceptable. Furthermore, this decision was deliberately leaked, as we've heard, in order to get ahead of any press or official scrutiny. Post office workers were waking up and reading about the potential end of their jobs in a newspaper or watching it on the television. I again reiterate that this is simply unacceptable. 10 of the Crown Post Offices, of course, are in Scotland, where the sector is already heavily depleted, leaving many communities without direct access to a post office. These often larger branches are a lifeline for many who have had more local post offices closed now than most can put up with, and most struggle sometimes to find a place to do business or sort out personal affairs. Crown Post offices are often many services that are not easily accessible and available for people elsewhere. That's a valuable thing during a time when the high street is being cut to the bone. This decision is needless and just exacerbates already existing problems. So why is it that we have spent the last decade or more stripping the Royal Mail and post offices of its utility and incredible community link? Has this made the country better off? I think we've heard that these decisions have led to greater modernisation and more stable employment. No, that's not what we have heard. It's led to an enormous amount of legal fees and consultants raking it in whilst ordinary working people suffer, as is often the case. The decision would decimate the post office network, the post office network across the UK, leading to 1,000 jobs being lost, with many of those being in Scotland. I speak to constituents, as I've heard other members speak today, every week, that are desperate for a service like the one the post office used to provide. Not only was it an important utility for business and families, but it provided a community hub with staff who would take the time to offer genuine help. I fear we are approaching the days when post offices will be quite rare. I will, of course, be supporting the rights of workers and the trade unions to stand against this decision, which I have no doubt they will. This is no way to treat those who have shouldered the burden of pressure that has been placed on post office workers for many years. The review must be reconsidered, and I will be supporting the CWU in their work to work alongside the workforce. And thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and to Kenny Gibson again for bringing this to the Chamber.
Thank you, Ms Morgan. I now call Audrey Nicholl to be followed by Tim Eagle. Ms Nicholl.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I too would like to congratulate my colleague Kenneth Gibson on bringing this debate to Chamber. As already referenced, the Post Office is owned by the UK Government, as it has announced more than 100 branches could close with the possible loss of hundreds of jobs. And this comes as a bitter blow for postmasters and the communities they serve tirelessly, coming at a time when local services have already been fading from high streets, town centres and villages. And as the motion says, at a time when more and more shops and services are leaving the high street, there is a case for more Crown branches, not fewer. The Post Office network provides critical services that go beyond just post, access to cash banking and government services such as driving licence renewal, albeit some of these have declined in recent years and moved online. Many of my small business constituents, including creators and artists, depend on local post offices to send customers products further afield. And there's something comforting about that red and yellow post office sign above a shop door. You just know that when you go in, there will be a welcome human interaction. The postmaster will know exactly what you need, and you can also pick up a nice birthday card, some brown wrapping paper, string, or a jiffy bag while you're at it. And in my constituency of Aberdeen South and North Kincardine, they've seen post offices reduced to only 3 post offices left, serving a population of around 79,000. So although it will not be impacted by future closure plans, I agree with other members that previous consultation and the rationale for closures has been lacking. So I read with interest some of the rationale for the review of post office services as they were set out during the Westminster debate last month. And on the one hand, the post office was described as simply not fit for purpose, with a toxic culture in head office and years of underinvestment. Significant cultural change and rebuilding trust is required to ensure the needs of postmasters and customers are met. And of course, it's no secret the business is facing commercial challenges. So it's not unreasonable that change is needed. However, the possible loss of 115 branches and 1,000 or so jobs being the solution is devastating, and it raises many questions, including on the process of consultation that has already been raised by members. Now, as I understand it, postmasters, trade unions and other stakeholders will be consulted, and rightly so. However, it's disappointing that communities that rely on these services have not been specifically mentioned. One significant group that will undoubtedly be impacted is older people, and I'm grateful to Age Concern for their helpful briefing in which they make a range of important points. I want to touch on a couple of those points. Firstly, on facilities at post offices, and they say that they're concerned that the closure of these branches, which are easy to access, especially in more remote and rural areas, may mean older people face challenges travelling further to access the services they need. And without improving the alternative branches that people are to use when the Crown branches close, it risks further exclusion and increases inequality for a considerable proportion of the population. And on the digital skills side of things and access to the internet, Age Concern point out that there are a significant number of older people in Scotland who are either not online or lack the basic digital skills to use the internet safely. Face-to-face services such as those at post offices are essential for older people. And finally, there is a digital access gap between the most and least deprived parts of Scotland. So a lot of points of concern. So in conclusion, Presiding Officer, I hope that rather than seeking to reduce post office provision in Scotland, the UK Government takes the opportunity to strengthen the role of post offices in our communities so that they can offer more local services, meeting the needs of postmasters and customers, including businesses, and bring a modernised and fit-for-purpose post office back to our high streets and communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Nicholl. I now call Tim Eagle to be followed by Fergus Ewing. Mr Eagle.
Well, thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I thank Kenny Gibson for bringing this. Almost agreed until you had a wee dig at the Tory government, but we'll let that slip this time, because actually I do think this issue does transcend party lines for most of us. Because I was shocked to see the full list of planned closures put forward by the Post Office recently. In the Highlands and Islands, there are 3 post offices which are under threat: Inverness, Kirkwall and Stornoway, of which Fergus Ewing and Liam MacArthur have mentioned 2 of already. 2 of these, Kirkwall and Stornoway, are on vulnerable island communities, already suffering from previous losses of services and struggling with rural depopulation. I know through the contacts I've had with local people in Stornoway that these proposals are very unpopular. The Stornoway Post Office at present is centrally located within the town, which makes it convenient to all for service users. If it closes, the community is left with the post office facilities housed within filling stations, community shops, etc., which is less accessible. Whilst that is good that something remains, residents have described it as a retrograde step for an island population who sees it as an essential link to mainland for goods and services, etc. Islanders are upset, and so they should be. A founding principle of the Post Office is that it is a national institution that provides a range of services to all our communities, regardless of their geographical location. Politicians across this chamber have repeatedly highlighted the unfairness around parcel delivery costs. Mainland locations, well connected, are considered far remote in the eyes of far too many companies, attracting huge postal charges for delivery of online goods, and they are a curse to local businesses who want to be competitive in online sales. It remains a source of significant frustration to me that my constituents are disadvantaged in this way. Fair parcel delivery pricing should be the norm in the UK. It is unacceptable to me that it is not. Yet anything which further challenges the sending and receiving of parcels can only be a bad thing for my island communities, for my constituents in Stornoway and Kirkwall. Presiding Officer, I want to mention the stepping stones mentality of closures. A local councillor in Stornoway pointed out to me that when TSB closed their Stornoway branch, the suggested alternative was the post office to carry out their banking transactions. So what now for customers, I wonder? Another option, perhaps, until we hop to the next stepping stone to find out if that too will stay open? I agree with Rachel Hamilton's point about banking hubs. I think Link have done some good work there, but I think we all need to come together to make sure that all of our communities have the access to banking and post offices that they need. I urge the Post Office to think carefully about any closures in Scotland, to make sure they fully engage with the communities that they are currently serving, and most importantly for me, to look after our islands. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Eagle. And I call Fergus Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm now in the 5th decade of having known Kenneth Gibson as a friend and subsequently a colleague. And without wanting to butter him up, Presiding Officer, I can safely say that having known certainly hundreds, if not thousands, of public servants in elected positions, I haven't actually come across any who work with such assiduousness and diligence as my friend Kenny, and therefore younger members have an awful lot to learn from Mr Gibson, most of it useful. And bringing this debate today is just another example of that, because across the chamber, albeit in a relatively sparsely attended chamber, there's no Green here to defend the post offices, which is a shame, but there have been a wide range of arguments everybody has expressed. I don't think I should repeat them, but rather just make a few additional points. Queensgate in my constituency is really the beating heart of Inverness. Anyone who is familiar with Inverness will know that it's just opposite the Victorian Market, whose clientele are largely senior citizens, and for them, coming to the city centre of Inverness, as it is now city, is a social experience as well as a visit to the post office. The bus services are right outside the post office, so those who don't have access to a car can easily attend the post office and then go and have a coffee or a drink with their friends, pick up something from the market. And it brings a huge number of people into town, and it is part of the social life. And that's where the post office differ from the banks, I think. I mean, one can understand that banks have a commercial purpose. They're commercial companies run for profit. But we thought the post office was different. We thought it was primarily a public service. Not now. And one point I do want to make is different is that I think it was Carol Mochan who made the point, Presiding Officer, that the strategic review, as it's called, leaked on the 13th of November, I think, hasn't even been supplied to the CWU, the union. Well, I bet you the government have got it. I bet you the UK government have got it. That's the way it works. The government will have given it. So why have they kept it secret? I think it's fair to ask. It's a shame that there's not Labour front benches here, perhaps, to enlighten us. But if they've got it, why have they kept it secret? Are they now on the side of the post office bosses? And let me turn to the bosses. I mean, I've already said, but I think it's worth repeating, that Mr Reid got 816,000 in 222. What I didn't say was that 415,000 of that was a salary. The other 400,000 was bonuses. Now, he paid back 54,000, which he said was the proportion attributable to the post office inquiry. But many would ask, particularly those of us who are familiar with the post office serial injustice, the most serious, widespread, disgraceful, despicable injustice in modern times, how they can take that amount of money home and save face is a complete mystery to me. In fact, the salary was apparently not enough for this gentleman, and it was argued on his behalf by another boss that he should get even more. This is despicable. And it's not just there, it's in Scotland, where over 1,000 people in public service get over £100,000, I believe. That's one Scottish regiment, Presiding Officer, that's unlikely to be disbanded any time soon. Could I finish by saying that many members have made very useful points about more services that the Post Office could provide. I think Rachel Hamilton, Audrey Nicholl, Bob Doris all covered ways in which the Post Office could expand. Isn't it time they use a bit of imagination about this? I mean, why not share offices with other services which the public need to access, like law centres or like the CAB, who could and do have positions in other public services like hospitals and so on. Why not seek other participants in order to share the overheads and costs of such a centralised building? Why not think out of the box? Why not offer a wider range of services, as has been said, particularly when the range and access to banks and other alternatives in city centres in the retail sense is shrinking in front of our eyes, and city centres are dying on their feet. So I was pleased to make the decision to take part at somewhat short notice in this debate, but like Mr Gibson, I do my best to stand up for my constituents, although perhaps not with quite the same unremitting vigour that my friend Mr Gibson has displayed over several decades.
Thank you, Mr Ewing. And I now ask the Minister, Ivan McKee, to respond to the debate. Around 7 minutes, please, Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I would like to thank Kenneth Gibson for bringing this important issue to the Chamber. And speaking as one of the younger members that Fergus Ewing referred to, I of course recognise as much I can continue to learn from Kenny Gibson. And before I start my remarks in the Post Office, I recognise the comments that Fergus Ewing made around the public sector more generally, and rest assured that and many other issues are within the scope of the work I am taking forward on public service reform. Presiding Officer, access to a post office is a vital lifeline for communities across Scotland, particularly for, of course, rural communities and vulnerable or digitally excluded consumers. Any reduction in branch numbers will impact on access to essential services, and this is why this Scottish Government will argue wholeheartedly against their closure. Post offices and postal services are reserved, of course, to the UK Government. However, when the news of these potential closures first came to our attention, the Scottish Government immediately sought reassurance from the Post Office around the potential impact on the people of Scotland. My officials have long-standing good relations with the Post Office, and it is advised that no final decisions have yet been taken on the outcome of its strategic review. There is therefore a good opportunity to set out the Scottish Government's position on the role of the Post Office in a dynamic and modern economy as a cornerstone of the postal and delivery sector, and with a role in providing other crucial services to our communities. I should say first that it is perfectly legitimate to review business operations and ensure that they are on a sustainable and successful footing. Not too long ago, in 2017, the Post Office and UK banks reached an industry-wide agreement to increase the range of banking services available within Post Office branches. Post offices now operate a wide range of critical services such as savings accounts, pensions, benefits and tax credits, bill payments, foreign money and travel insurance. This change took place as part of efforts to reduce the impact of banks shutting their branches due to more people opting to use online or mobile banking. However, operating such an important service comes with a level of responsibility to the people you serve. And just this month, the British Retail Consortium published data showing that cash transactions have increased for the second consecutive year, showing that access to cash is increasingly important for many. Members across the Chamber represent constituents who will suffer if these closures go ahead. Scotland has a significant number of rural post offices which are perceived as being less viable than those in urban areas and thus requiring a higher level of subsidy. Any closure of a local post office could in many cases mean shutting of the only reliable route for receiving parcels and mail, along with other essential services such as those I have described. Of course, driving economic growth is a central mission of this Government, and we need sustainable and successful businesses, large and small, to remain commercially viable in Scotland. I am aware that directly managed branches are loss-making and that there is therefore a long-standing commitment to move to a fully franchise-based delivery model. However, the first step should be to explore how these post offices, which are a vital lifeline, particularly to rural and island communities, can be turned into profit-making enterprises and in time transition to a franchise model. The fact that they are critical infrastructure for so many makes these post offices even more important, not less. It is therefore incumbent on the Post Office, funded primarily by the UK Government, to make decisions which support their viability, not to close them down, losing jobs and services. I want to recognise that both the Post Office and the Royal Mail have been faced with stark choices due to the rise of online delivery firms. Thankfully, both organisations have committed to working together to face that challenge head-on. In 2020, they signed a new commercial agreement, known as the Second Mails Distribution Agreement. This agreement came into force in March 2021 and will operate until at least March 2032. The purpose of the agreement is to offer consumers access to a wider number of operators than was previously the case, improving competition in the parcels market. Improving facilities for secure pick-up can also reduce the number of unsuccessful deliveries, an obvious source of consumer frustration, allowing people to make arrangements for parcel collection which suit their own schedules. That is an example of both organisations making decisions that will benefit the consumer. The fact remains, however, that closing the 10 remaining directly managed branches in Scotland will not benefit the consumer or, in my view, the Post Office. So I'm pleased that the Post Office remains open and committed to dialogue on this, given the tangible impact it will have on the lives of many, particularly older people who may be less likely to use online services. Once you factor in the indeed.
Liam MacArthur.
Can I thank the Minister for taking the intervention, and certainly agree with everything he said today. The point I made earlier in my remarks, and Bob Doris made in his contribution, was around the way in which this information got into the public domain. Does he feel that, notwithstanding the commitment that's been made to consult, that process of consultation has been made immeasurably more difficult by the fact that many people will just assume that the conclusion of that consultation is a fait accompli?
Minister.
I absolutely recognise the point that Liam MacArthur makes, and I will be writing, following on from this debate, to Gareth Thomas, the relevant UK Government Minister, to make the points, raise the points that have been made in this debate, including that particular point. And I take this opportunity also to recognise the very many very valuable contributions made by members across the Chamber in this debate this evening. So the fact remains, however, that closing the 10 remaining directly managed branches in Scotland will not benefit consumer or, in my view, the Post Office. So I'm pleased that the Post Office does remain open and committed to dialogue on this, as they have indicated, notwithstanding the point that Liam MacArthur very effectively makes. Presiding Officer, what I've described today is an organisation that can and should evolve to meet the needs of communities. Finding ways to make a business relevant to the people it is intended to serve is the foundation of commercial viability. There are over 1,300 post offices in Scotland and only 10 are centrally owned. That number may seem small and insignificant to those sitting in post office headquarters, but the impact on the everyday lives of people across the country would be hugely detrimental. The fact that the post office is so crucial to these communities is a mark of its success. It's a mark of the success of the women and men who work in these post offices and who deserve to have clarity over the future of their jobs. Post offices offer a lifeline that must be maintained regardless of whether they are centrally or franchisee owned. So, as Scottish Government, we stand ready to work constructively with the UK Government, the Post Office and other stakeholders to ensure that consumers, local communities and businesses have access to the facilities they need. We cannot let these communities down. We cannot let these workers down. And I call on the UK Government and the Post Office to ensure that doesn't happen. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes the debate, and I close this meeting.